Hello, BookTube. 2025 is almost here. It's been a great reading year. I'm very happy that 2024 went as well as it did, but 2025, I have big things planned. Great standalones to give a try. Great, amazing, epic series to dive into. But in preparing and making plans and making a schedule for 2025, I realize that I am currently reading so many series right now that it would be irresponsible for me to dive into new literary journeys before finishing what I'm already consuming. Here are the numbers. I am currently reading 16 different series, 3 of which are ongoing. I have no idea when they are going to finish. If I was just to read books from the series that I'm currently reading, if I was just going to solely focus on that, that is 113 books. That's a lot of books. Yes, 36 of them are just from Terry Pratchett's Discworld, which is in reality like six or seven mini series. But even without Discworld in the mix, that is 81 books. That's a lot of different stories. That's a lot of different narratives that I'm trying to finish. There's a lot of ground to cover in this video, so I'm going to briefly talk about all these different topics. First, I'm going to talk about all the series that I finished in 2024. And then I'm going to talk about all the series that I'm choosing not to move forward with. Series that I am DNFing, whether that is a hard DNF or a soft DNF, who knows? But I'm definitely not reading these 3 series within the next 5 to 10 years. And then I'm going to talk about all the series that I'm choosing to move forward with in order from highest priority to lowest priority, because it's a lot of series and there's no way I'm going to try to focus on all of them with the same intensity. I think this video will give you guys a very clear picture of what my reading schedule is going to look like next year. And if you like any of these series, be sure to follow along. I finished 6 series in 2024. Mark Lawrence's Impossible Times trilogy. I read the last 2 installments of this series. I loved the last one, Dispel Illusion. What a great ending to his trilogy. One of the most cathartic endings I've ever encountered. This is a severely underrated Mark Lawrence trilogy. I've read 4 of them at this point. The Impossible Times should be more talked about. The next series I finished was Peter McLean's War for the Rose Crown Quartet. I've read the last book, A Priest of Crowns. And I'm not going to lie, the ending of this quartet really bugs me. The plot was concluded like in 15 pages. Everything was very rushed, and that was surprising because originally this series was going to be a trilogy. The author expanded it into a quartet because he said he needed more time, and somehow found a way to make the plot feel rushed. A very underwhelming ending to a series that was going to be one of my favorite series of all time, until a subpar, lackluster, satisfactory ending. Next, I finished the Gwendy's Button Box trilogy by Stephen King and Richard Chismar. I don't think this book needed to be a trilogy. I think the first installment, Gwendy's Button Box, was plenty, but the author felt the need to expand it. I liked the second installment. I loved the ending of the third installment, Gwendy's Final Task, but it was so overly politicized, it was so unnecessary, that I'm not sure the great ending was worth it. It's like great beginning, annoying middle part of this series, amazing ending. I'm not sure how I feel about it, honestly. If you're a big fan of all the interconnectedness of Stephen King's multiverse, I think you'll find a lot you like about this trilogy, but there's a lot of flaws. I also finished Guy Haley's Dreaming Cities series, and I'm bummed because I didn't truly finish it. The author has just decided not to continue on writing it, so I read 2 books in a series of novellas that's never going to be complete, which is sad because I really feel like the author hit his stride in the second installment. The Ghoul King. I liked that novella. I'll never see how the story concludes, and that's a damn shame. And 2 weeks ago, I read Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. This is the sequel to the very popular and successful Legends and Lattes. I love Bookshops and Bone Dust. I think it was better than Legends and Lattes. Different subject matter, different tone, not quite as cozy, but overall, a way better story. I read the sequel to Hollow Kingdom, one of the funniest books I ever read. Feral Creatures by Kira Jane Buxton captured the magic of the first book. So funny. This is a zombie apocalypse series from the point of view of the animals that are left behind. Think The Secret Life of Pets meets The Walking Dead from the point of view of a domesticated crow. It's wild, it's hilarious, and it hits you in the feels. Can't recommend this duology enough. There are 2 other series that I didn't quite finish, but I am up to date with. Sean McGuire's Wayward Children series and Martha Wells' Murderbot diaries. Sean McGuire's Wayward Children, I don't think this series is going to end anytime soon, and that makes me sad because the first arc of this storyline was amazing, top notch. But I really feel like the second arc, the most current arc the author is focusing on, is not nearly as interesting or compelling as the rest of the series. And that is frustrating because I think the author might ruin a great thing. I also am up to date with the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. I've loved the series so far, even if I found the last two installments to be slightly more lackluster. The author is in a fight against breast cancer right now, so thoughts and prayers to Martha Wells. Hopefully she beats it, she returns to health, and she continues on with the Murderbot Diaries. But understandably so, we don't know when the next installment of this series is coming out, but I'm sure it'll happen. I'm sure it'll be concluded eventually. I hate leaving stories unfinished. So for me to decide to not move forward with the series, I have to really not be having a good time. That being said, there are 3 series that at this point in my life, I'm choosing to not continue on with. The first one being The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. The author is dragging his feet on concluding this series, and he's taking several years between publications, and I don't understand. I don't understand what all the hype's about. I've read the first 3 installments, and it's just okay. I'm also not the target audience because I don't care for urban fantasy. So many people love Jim Butcher's writing. They love Harry Dresden. But I find all the characters to be so static and wooden and stupid. They're not growing. They make stupid decisions. They miscommunicate. All their problems could be solved if they just were honest with each other, and they don't do it. And I don't see the appeal of this series. Perhaps when the author concludes this massive series, I might continue on with it. But as of right now, I'm 3 books into the Dresden Files, and I think that's where it's going to stop for me. The next series I know I'm not going to be finishing is the Nameless series by Dean Koontz. Dean Koontz, I understand why he's so well loved. I understand why he's one of the best-selling thriller authors of all time. But the Nameless series, I don't know why these books are so high rated. They're a short story collection published on Amazon. I've read 3 of the 12, and they're just okay. It follows a vigilante. I love vigilanteism. One of my favorite tropes, one of my favorite like themes to follow and to explore. But Nameless is just okay. And even though I hate to leave a story unfinished, I don't think this is going to end in a very intellectually stimulating way, and I'd rather waste my time in more enjoyable ways. Last series that I'm not moving forward with is a soft DNF for sure. Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. I want to read these books with my children one day. I love the writing, it's very playful, but I'm turning 30 next year. There are so many other series that I'm going to read that I'm going to find a lot more intellectually stimulating, a lot more emotionally compelling, and Lemony Snicket, amazing writer. I understand why this series is so successful, and I will be returning to this series in a future date, probably 5 to 8 years from now. The next series I'm going to finish is the 3rd installment in Neal Shusterman's Age of Sythe. I recently read Thunderhead, which is the 2nd installment, and it was pretty dang good. The Toll is next. I've heard a lot of mixed things about this book, and that does make me a little nervous, a little hesitant, but I can't read 2/3 of a trilogy and not finish it. I've loved the first 2 installments, even though Thunderhead took me like about half of it to really get into, but I'll be reading The Toll early next year, perhaps even before the end of 2024, and that'll definitely be the next series that I finish. The second series I'm going to finish is Jack Townsend's Tales from the Gas Station. This quartet of books is infuriating. It is entertaining. It is humorous. It is dark. It's horror adjacent. I would never classify these as horrors, but they read very much like creepypastas from the early 2000s. The primary setting is a gas station in this small town in the South, and this gas station, weird things happen. There's mutated raccoons, there's dead gods, there's great collectors, there's eldritch horrors. A lot of things happen at this gas station. The writing isn't of the highest quality, but the story is engaging. Even though I've read 2.5 volumes of this series, I'm still not sure what's happening. And I'm becoming more and more unsure of how it's going to end. I don't believe the author is going to close off this series with a nice little bow. I think there's going to be a lot of open-ended questions. I hope that's not the case, but this series is such a fever dream, and I'm going to be finishing it very soon. So hopefully I finish volume 3 in the next few days. I tackle volume 4 in January, and this series leaves a good taste in my mouth because I'm a little worried about this one. Series number 3, Dungeon Crawler Carl. I read the first installment by Matt Dinneman a few months ago, and I absolutely loved it. Initially, I was turned off because this series is ongoing. There are 6 more installments I have yet to read, but who knows when it's going to finish. The author is kind of hinted that there's like 5 or 6 installments left. It's going to be about 12 to 15, books, I believe, but he publishes several in a year, so I should be finished. The series should be finished up in a relatively short span of time. I'm going to binge the next 6 installments. I'll definitely be up to date with this series before April. Who knows if it's going to be the 3rd series I finish as from this video, but I'm definitely going to be prioritizing Dungeon Crawler Carl. There's a reason why this series is converting so many readers here on BookTube into lit RPG readers, and I think it's a very exciting market change for the platform. Series number 4, Anthony Ryan's Brotherhood of Steel. I read his first book in the series, The Pariah. It blew my mind. It was the first book of the month for 2024, but I kept getting distracted from reading the second book, The Martyr, by a bunch of other shiny, sparkly new reads. But I'm going to finish this trilogy. The author recently released the first book in a new trilogy set in the same universe, and I gotta catch up. I gotta start getting ready to tackle Anthony Ryan's next trilogies. He's a very underrated author here on BookTube. He writes amazing characters, compelling action scenes, very good grimdark fantasy, very interesting critiques about religion, power, oppression, and I can't wait to see how this trilogy ends. Series number 5, The Crimson Empire by Alex Marshall. I read the first installment of this book, I think at the end of 2023, A Crown for Cold Silver. This is one of the main reasons I started reading fantasy as an adult. I read the first 2 installments in this trilogy years ago, got distracted, tried to come back to the 3rd installment like years later, and I couldn't remember anything, so I started my reread. I hate rereading books. I hate it. I feel like it's a massive waste of time a lot of the time. But I feel like I owe it to myself to finish this trilogy because the first book, it stands up. It's a solid 4-star read. And the second installment I remember a little bit more fondly, I believe. So I'll be reading A Blade of Black Steel and then A War in Crimson Empire, Embers. Hopefully this series will be done before June of next year because it's a very underrated series. I can't even say it's underrated. No one talks about it here on BookTube, and that's a damn shame because I want to talk to people about this trilogy because I love the characters. I remember this book so fondly, and hopefully they hold up now that my reading tastes are a little bit more refined. Next, we have Stephen King's Dark Tower. I'm going to be reading The Wasteland next. I read The Stand a month ago because I heard that you have to read The Stand to perfectly understand what's happening in the Dark Tower. And The Stand, that's a big book. I'm glad to be continuing on my journey for the Dark Tower. I'm glad to be back with my quartet of individuals, such colorful characters. There's a reason why Stephen King fans consider the Dark Tower series to be his magnus opus. I look forward to reading this along with one of my best friends. It's going to be a very exciting 2025 as I return to this fever dream of a journey. Next, we have the Neapolitan Quartet. This is regular literary fiction. It takes place over several decades. It follows 2 best friends in Italy, 2 young women as they grow into old women. I read the first installment of this series, My Beautiful Friend, as a recommendation from one of my favorite book talkers, and it was really damn good. I love family sagas. There's a reason why my favorite book of all time is Blackwater by Michael McDowell. This book really made me realize that I loved family sagas. I love series that take place over decades of time. And the Neapolitan Quartet is very highly rated by those that have read it. This hasn't really caught fire here on BookTube, but it's very popular over in Europe. And I look forward to finishing the Neapolitan Quartet and seeing what all the hullabaloo is about. Next, we have Will White's Cradle series. This is hit or miss for a lot of booktubers. A lot of people say that it's a little underwhelming. They're not big fans of progression fantasy, but I'm a firm believer that after a lot of booktubers are done reading Dungeon Crawler Carl, and they want to read more lit RPGs or progression fantasy, that a lot of them are going to start reading Cradle. I've read the first two installments. I liked the first one. The second one was very underwhelming, but I have 10 more books left. They're relatively short. I heard that the characters grow immensely. I heard that the character arcs, and the story is worth it in the end. And I want to see where it goes. I want to see what made this series so immensely successful, because this is what made me really want to get into lit RPGs and progression fantasy. And even though the second installment was underwhelming, I want to give this series a fresh start and continue on with this massive journey because I own every book in the series. It's a waste of money not to read it. Lit RPGs are going to be one of my main focuses for 2025. The only problem with lit RPGs, most of them are ongoing. Authors seem to not know how to finish these massive, long, ongoing series. But I've been able to find and start several lit RPGs that I think I will enjoy enough to not mind waiting for each subsequent installment. And the first lit RPG I'm going to really be focusing on finishing in 2025 is Seth Ring's Nova Terra series. This features an overpowered protagonist in a virtual reality world. I hear it takes place over 10 years. I like the first installment a lot. It's a nice hero's journey. Young protagonist grows up, learns how the real world is inside this virtual world, makes friends and enemies, he's overpowered. I've heard it's good fun. I really enjoy Seth Ring's YouTube channel. He's a very prolific author. His output is insane. I really think he's going to end up being the Brandon Sanderson of lit RPGs. And I look forward to seeing how Nova Terra ends. I've heard that the payoff is definitely worth it. The next lit RPG I'm going to be focusing on is Critical Failures. This has been my guilty pleasure for the second half of 2024. It follows a bunch of friends that are a bunch of murder hobos playing Dungeons and Dragons. They get sent into the Dungeons and Dragons world, which inside this series is called Caverns and Creatures, and they're just doing really stupid stuff. If you like humor from the early 2000s and early 2010s, I think you will find this series to be hilarious. It is ongoing. The author has stated that he wants to have 20 installments in this series. I'm not sure about that. I think the series will end before that, but I've loved all installments so far. I've read 3 of them. I have 7 more to go, and then I'm up to date, and I've been laughing out loud the entire journey. Next, we have The Good Guys. I've heard great things about this series, primarily from Brian Bell over at BellTube, and I'm super excited to continue on with the journey. I just finished the first book. It is hilarious. I love the protagonist. I love the character work. I love the action scenes. I love the humor. There are 14 more installments in this series, and from what I understand, there are 2 more series that like overlap and lead into this series. So who knows how many dozens of books will be in this narrative, but I think it might be my cup of tea. If the quality drops off a lot, I will obviously DNF the series, but I'm very hopeful at this point in time. The Good Guys, it's good fun. Brian Bell put it in his legendary tier, and like when he tier ranked all these lit RPG series that he've read, and I'm going to trust him on this. Next, we have Dr. Sleep by Stephen King. This is the sequel to Stephen King's The Shining. I read that book 2 weeks ago. It was amazing. I did not know The Shining was the first in a series. I did not know it had a sequel, but I loved it. I'm going to be focusing on finishing Dr. Sleep early in 2025 because duologies, those are series, baby. I gotta get them out of the way. Next, we have John Gwynn's The Faithful and the Fallen. I have 3 more books left in this series. I read the first book, Malice, like 4 months ago, and it was mid. It was satisfactory. I did not like several of the point of view characters. It was very slow moving, and I was led to believe that his books are action packed. The last 20% of this book was really fun, really good fun. There are character deaths, there are stakes. It's like Noble Bright-esque, not really grimdark, but not quite Noble Bright. And I am hopeful for the next installments of the series. I've heard that the first installment, Malice, is by far the weakest, but I don't think I'm going to finish it in 2025. I'm definitely going to commit to reading 2 more installments. Hopefully I like it. Hopefully my opinion changes about this series because right now I'm not confident that I'm going to love it. The next 3 series I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to finish them in 2025. I have no doubt in my mind. They are good. I'm committed to finishing them, but just in terms of how much time it would take, it just wouldn't be feasible to read these series and say I'm going to read them knowing I have so many other series that I'm enjoying way more. The first of these series is Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson's Wheel of Time series. 4.4 million words. I recently finished, well, not recently, a year ago I finished The Shadow Rising. I'm going to commit to reading 2 more installments of The Wheel of Time in 2025, but then I'm at the slog, and I imagine I'm not going to want to push through the slog when I'm already focusing on so many other series that I'm more hopeful that I'm going to enjoy next year. But yeah, Wheel of Time, it's like a rite of passage for many booktubers. I've loved all the books I've read so far. I mean, The Dragon Reborn was okay, but The Great Hunt's one of my favorite books of all time. I love The Shadow Rising. I love The Eye of the World. I'm sure the payoff's going to be worth it, but there are so many other series that are higher priority to me. But I'll definitely be making some more ground in the Wheel of Time, and I think I'll be finishing it in 2026. But who knows? Speaking of massive series that I know I'm not going to finish, Discworld by Terry Pratchett. My wife somehow managed to binge 35 of these books so far this year. She may finish this series in the next month or so. And I want to read along with her, but I just get distracted. She's very much a binger, and I'm always dabbling and jumping around. I'm definitely going to finish at least one of the sub-series of Discworld, probably the Night's Watch or the Death storylines, but I know I'm not going to finish the next 35 or 36 books I have left in this massive, monstrously long series. But yeah, I'll make some good progress. And finally, Jeff Lindsay's Dexter series. I love the TV show. You probably love the TV show. It was a phenomenon before the writers ruined it. The writers ruined the show twice. They rebooted it and then ruined it again. And then I decided that I was going to read the books. The first book, I loved it. It captured the magic of the TV show because it was so alike to the first season of the Dexter TV show. The second book was much darker than any season of the TV show. And I liked it, but it was very different. Very different indeed. I picked up the third installment of this series in March, and I couldn't get into it. I'm going to give the third and fourth book in this series another try because I heard that this series is very underrated. I love Dexter as a character. I want to explore more into that storyline, into that lore. But who knows? I may not even read the next 2 installments of this series, and perhaps it'll be a DNF for 2025. So there you have it. All the series that are on my mind for 2025. The goal is to finish at least 12 series next year because I want to start between 10 and 12. And that way, at the end of the year, I will not be reading any more than 20 series at the same time, which I think is a manageable threshold to maintain. I want to finish these massive narratives. I want to see great epic endings. I want to feel that post-series depression that we're always chasing for as a reader. And I can't wait to see how great a reading year 2025 is going to be. So how about you guys? What series are you going to be focusing on next year?